opening myself, and I would also like to, if David Broder had turned up. We have invited the Conrad a number of times actually over the years, I think. We certainly invited him last year, and we were told that he wasn't allowed to speak. And indeed what we had is the AWL turning up at the beginning of the school, I don't know if comrades remember, and picketing the school, demanding, I can't remember exactly what, but I remember I came past them with Hillel, we both met each other at the station, and I was saying, well, come outside, set your literature table up, debate with us, and they said no, and I think a similar thing happened this year. What's remarkable, it's the first time I've read this leaflet from Workers' Liberty, which is obviously aimed at the CPGB, and it ends with this statement. These things need to be discussed, i.e. their leaflet, Iran, and the bomb in Israel, and all the rest of it. We challenge those who make Hopi policy, the WWG.
We do everything.
Exactly. The weekly worker group, to debate us publicly on this question at a time and place with a chair acceptable to both sides. What's remarkable is in terms of us drafting the timetable for this school, we officially invited the AWL to debate what subject? Iran. And what did they say, Mark?
Can we debate Afghanistan again?
Yes, they said no. And they didn't just say Afghanistan, they wanted to debate Afghanistan 1979 to 1992. They didn't want to debate Afghanistan with British and American troops there. They wanted to debate Afghanistan, you know, the Saur Revolution, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, Soviet intervention, all that, which we've done here. And we've done at their school many, many, many times. It's not that we're not willing to debate that question continuously with them. But given that Sean McGamner, the leader, the patriarch of the AWL, has been talking about Iran and the need for Israel to defend itself, and indeed, if Israel, he speculated, does the inevitable, and that is launch a preemptive strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, who are we to protest? Who are we to object to that? While we don't urge them on, right, this is what the man said, while we don't urge them on, we're not going to join the protests of the kitsch left. The kitsch left protesting at an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. What's he mean by the kitsch left? I would have thought, you know, if I could hazard a guess, if that actually happened, I think the demonstration that took place in London in protest at the forthcoming invasion of Iraq, I don't know how many people turned up. Was it 1.5 million? Was it 2 million? But I would hazard a guess that would be dwarfed by the reaction of democratic and humanitarian and decent-minded people. They would come out on the streets throughout the world. It wouldn't take anybody to organise them. It would be spontaneous mass protests. What would the AWL be saying under those circumstances? Would they be giving out a leaflet like the WRP famously did? Was it at Grosvenor Square, Mike, in 1968? Why we aren't marching, why you're wrong to march under these circumstances? Is that what the AWL would do? Well, it seems to be. That actually does seem to be the situation. Okay. Well, they do say, if you're in a hole, stop digging, but they also say the best form of defence is attack. Well, to me, this leaflet is an example of both those things. If I was in that hole, I would stop digging. On the other hand, Sean McGamner is a combative, factional, sectarian. See, I'm saying it with no passion and no venom, am I? He's a sectarian, factional fighter. This is why we've got this leaflet, right? This is why we've got it. And we haven't got this leaflet, by the way, comrades, because he actually wants to debate with the weekly worker group, or as we call it, he can't manage to do that, can he? It's not a question he wants to debate with us. It's not a question he wants to convince me, Mark, Stan, Tom, Anne, Tina, or any of the other comments. What it's all about is cohering his own organisation. Because at their last annual conference, which I think was May, 40% of the membership, not delegates, but membership, and I think they got about 100 members, or thereabouts. I mean, that's what they had last time I was at one of their things, right? 40%, in other words, say 40 people voted for a troops out position vis-a-vis Iraq. Now, from our point of view, that 40%, those 40 votes, it was a pretty miserable, centrist, squadgy position. Because we're saying to these comrades, look, if you're serious, you've actually got to separate yourself from George Bush and Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. Because if you listen to George Bush, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, what do they say? Troops out sometime, when we've won, when we've solved the situation, when we've settled the situation, when the Iraqis are mature enough, strong enough, when Afghan society is coherent enough to take over the role of peacekeeping and law and order. So we say, any principal position must be troops out now. We don't mean that as a magic wand, right? We mean that saying unconditionally. We don't think British imperialism, American imperialism has got any progressive role to play in those countries. We think, therefore, that we should fight for them to withdraw. No ifs, no buts, out. That is what our movement should stand by. So this 40% vote isn't, from our point of view, a principal position, but from Sean McGamner's point of view, it's an anathema. Not because he's opposed to imperialism, but because he's actually not just soft on imperialism, but because he's actually shifted from a so-called third camp position to a first camp position. I remember marching in to the demonstration after the Iraq War, after, what was it, Operation Desert Storm, wasn't it? Or was that the one before? When they got to Iraq, when they'd cleared out, was it General Schwarzkopf, wasn't it? When he'd driven up to Baghdad, they'd taken Baghdad, the war was over, stopped the war coalition, called a demonstration. I remember marching in to Hyde Park. There was the AWL stall. I go up to the AWL stall. There's Martin Thomas, number 2 in the hierarchy of the AWL. How's it going, Martin? Martin, the right side won, John. The right side won. It's better that British imperialism, it's better that American imperialism won than it lost. Well, of course, we took the opposite view. Where does this absurd idea come from? Well, to quote another leaflet in here, which I don't think is true, that's Jerry's leaflet, it comes from Kautskyism. That's where it comes from in terms of its origins. Right? Karl Kautsky, the so-called Pope of Marxism, published a book, pamphlet, in 1914, a very embarrassingly chosen date. But he wrote a book called Ultra-Imperialism. And basically what he said in 1914 is that the capitalist powers have become so integrated in, so dependent on each other, war is impossible. Well, Martin Thomas included that in a collection of articles, including an article by himself, in the last edition of Workers' Liberty, which I think would be 2002, something along those lines, a few years ago. So it was a valuable document, it was a valuable historical document. Completely wrong, in my view, well, evidently completely wrong. I mean, you know, millions were just about to prove him wrong by their deaths. But what did Martin Thomas say in terms of his commentary on Kautsky's ultra-imperialism? He said, well, all Kautsky really got wrong was the date. Right? What he postulated, what he talked about, is what exists now is something like ultra-imperialism. But not how should I put it, pecking order within the imperialist powers, or a pecking order between the imperialist powers and the junior imperialist powers, between the junior imperialist powers and the oppressed countries. What exists is a smooth world. Equality. There's one market, and all America does is act as the globo-cop. Right? It's nothing different to PC plod, keeping the peace between the various interests. It's not American hegemony, it's not American rule, it's not American exploitation of the planet in conjunction with its junior partner, Britain, in conjunction with its imperialist system, the EU. No, it's a smooth world of business competition policed by American forces. So what is going on in Iraq? America is spreading, in a brutal way, he says, civilization. It's spreading this model. And this model, it will turn out, Stan, don't worry, it's a bit brutal, but you just wait. This is going to be like West Germany after World War II. This is going to be like Japan. So the Iraqi people who've suffered under this terrible fascistic dictatorship of Saddam Hussein are going to be raised up by kind US imperialism. Right? They're going to give them democracy, and what will that result in? Quote unquote, normal class politics. Of course, what they mean by that is trade union politics. Well, comrades, look at the result. Look at Iraq today and talk about normal class politics. What the United States brought to Iraq was barbarism. Ask any trade unionist if they operate in a normal fashion. As I understand it, to operate as a trade unionist, you need an armed militia. Not the Americans, but an armed militia to protect you. And the idea that the Americans, of course, are fighting the armed militias, no, they're not. And the idea that the Americans are friendly to the trade unions, no, they're not. Right? America has brought destruction, America has brought barbarism. Now, okay, we all make mistakes, don't we? And if you make a mistake, you should learn. You know, if the world hasn't turned out to be as you thought it would, no matter what the mistake, admit it, correct it, put yourself back on the right road. But instead of that, what are we seeing? I won't call them the comrades of the AWL, but what have we seen from the AWL? Well, specifically what I want to deal with is Sean McGamner's last article in the current edition, isn't it? The current edition of Solidarity, their paper. I've already told you what he said. He excused Israel attacking, and that was the essence of it. Let's strip away the cant. Let's not be merely mouthed about it. He excused Israel. He talked about an Israeli strike being inevitable. We ran, I don't know if we've got a copy of it here, but we ran, there it is, with a front page showing a nuclear, there we are, this is the one. We ran with this front page showing a picture of a nuclear cloud, because we were trying to present this debate in the sharpest, most angular terms we could, but also most honest terms. AWL Sean McGamner excusing an Israeli nuclear attack on Iran. They've turned round, the initial reaction, outrageous, outrageous. Sean McGamner in his article did not mention nuclear weapons. It's absolutely true, absolutely true. If in my memory, did they actually mention missiles launched from submarines in the Red Sea? Did they mention F-15 fighters? No. But if I simply ask the question, you know, it doesn't take anybody, it doesn't take a genius. I'm no genius. I just Googled Iran nuclear, bunged it in my Google, pressed the button. What's the first thing I got up? Iran nuclear, Israeli nuclear strike. It's the first reference. There were hundreds of references, I hasten to add, but the first one that came up, of course, was from a newspaper or some website. Why? Because anyone who knows anything about Iran's nuclear facilities knows that they are not like Iraq's nuclear facilities, which Israel did attack. They're not like who knows what the site was in Syria. If it was nuclear, it was there, open, naked. They ain't like that. Iran's main nuclear site, Yasmin, is called Natanz. That's right, I did write it down there. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, right? I don't know much about meters and things like that, but what they've done with this site, which is something like 100,000 square meters or something like that, it's a big site. This is their nuclear site where they reprocess or process uranium or whatever they damn well do with uranium. It's what they do to purify it so that you can put it in nuclear power stations, maybe put them in bombs, I don't know. But you have to do it, right? This is what they do, right? They've got processes somewhere there, right? What they've done is dug a bloody big hole, right? They put the stuff down in the ground, right? As I understand it, something like 8 meters down.
75.
No, that's feet, right? This is what I'm saying, you know, correct me if I get it wrong. Okay, 8 meters down, which I think is a bit of a way. But then what they've done...
75 feet is actually about 30 meters.
Okay, I'm just going on the website that I copied, so I'm not CIA, I haven't been down there. I'm just telling you that they dug a hole in the ground. They haven't just left that hole in the ground, then put the stuff in. What they've done is covered it. And they covered it with something like meters of concrete, right? Then they covered it with something like 22 meters of earth, right? And then they put some more concrete on top of that. At least that's what I understand from the site. So I'm no expert, but what I do know, according to all the sites that I went on and read, right, is in order to get that site, in order to put it out of action, what do you need? Well, you need a bunker buster. But according to the BBC site, an ordinary bunker buster, you know what ordinary bunker busters are like, they're pretty bloody powerful. I think they're delayed explosives, so they explode and then explode. They go, they're meant to penetrate concrete, get down there and cause it, but that's not good enough. With a conventional bunker buster, which the Israelis have, right, thanks to George Bush has supplied them with conventional bunker busters, and it's called, I haven't got the name here, anyway, they're called something or other, right? They also have F-15, so this is a picture in this edition of an F-15 fighter launching a conventional bunker buster. But the Americans also have a nuclear bunker buster called a B-1116 or something like that. B-61-11. There you are. He's been doing layout. No, he's doing layout. He's been doing layout. And what these do, this is what you would need. It's this sort of a bomb that you would need. What these do, they can go down further, but when they explode, then they send shockwaves down this hole, and then they put it out of action. An ordinary one will cause some damage, but it will not get down there. I'm no military expert. That's what the BBC says. That's what all the sites that I read said. I went to Sunday Times, right? Yes, Sean's quite right. Israel has been practicing. We've seen the latest military exercises into the Mediterranean, right? Israel, Sunday Times said earlier this year, is preparing for a tactical nuclear strike. Doesn't mean it's going to do it, but militarily they're practicing for it. Now, we had a discussion, didn't we, the other day. Will they get the go-ahead from America and all the rest of it? Okay, I'm going to bow to Conrad to say they have to have at least that from the United States. I'm not going to argue about that. But if we're saying a strike is inevitable, right, what message does that send, right? Whose side are you on if you're actually advocating that? Now, again, I'm no expert on these questions. If someone wants to tell me I'm talking rubbish, I'm quite prepared to listen. As I understand it from not all the sites, some pro-American sites, like pro-Bush, right? The neocons, for example, will say okay, you have one of these bunker busters, it goes into Iran's nuclear facilities, it busts it apart, but because it's penetrating deep underground, no nuclear, radiation, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to go pop, boom, and that's it. Right? That's clean. So they're saying it's perfectly safe. All you're going to kill, a few technicians. I'm sorry. We're right to the family, and we'll apologise for that. But it was necessary. But that's what the neocons say. All the rest of it, and I suspect, in all honesty, that is not the case. Actually, on one website, they actually had a computer simulation of here's this bunker buster coming in. These can be accurately, guided. They're going to be, satellite computer system. They come in, splunch. Yes. Mushroom cloud. Okay. Then what happens? And remember, Iran hasn't just got one nuclear site. I mean, my list was a good dozen. I mean, if you're going to put out the system, and some of them will be in the open, but okay, let's just leave it at that. Just leave it at this one, just for the moment. How many people are going to suffer nuclear contamination? Well, of course, it depends on which way the wind is blowing. Now, someone might tell me that in Iran it blows that way, it blows that way, it blows that way, it blows that way. I don't know. But on this computer simulation, it did the trail of nuclear fuel. We know what happened in Chernobyl. I don't know if anyone has died yet in Britain because of it, right? But we know that we couldn't eat Welsh sheep. We know that the government took various measures, right? That's here. That's here. Who knows what a nuclear strike on a nuclear facility would result in? This isn't an explosion, is it? This is not an accident. This is a deliberate attempt to put it out of action using a nuclear device. The figures that I read talked about thousands, tens of thousands of casualties. That's what we're talking about. I personally, I think Yasmin, we asked Yasmin to write an article, and she wrote an article. You talk about bunker busters and all the rest of it, but I think you begin your article, you begin it with Sons of the Imam, but also I think you begin it sort of a bit, I am speechless, which is what, no, that was my reaction. I could not believe it. I could not believe anybody who called themselves a Marxist, a socialist, would advocate. That's what the man has done. A strike by Israel on Iran, let alone on its nuclear facilities, let alone, unless the guy's a fool, a buffoon, and ignorant, right? Let alone a nuclear attack. Because, as I say, that's really what it would involve. And if you take moral responsibility for that, which is what he's doing, right? You have to take moral responsibility for the inevitable means that the inevitable attack, according to him, has to take. There is no other way that Israel can do the job. Okay. What I wanted to do is to deal with a little bit of this counterattack, this apology for a leaflet that's designed to keep his own organisation intact. That's why David Broder's not here. I don't think it's because the buses are being cancelled or the trains aren't running. I think he's in fear of his membership of the AWL. That's entirely up to him, right? Reminds me in that sense of, where our party came from. Our party is called the CPGB. Used to be called the British Socialist Party. It used to be led by someone called Henry Hyman, who took the side of British imperialism in 1914. But our party also comes from those in 1916 who had successfully rebelled, who launched a paper in 1916 called The Call, who defeated Henry Hyman, who went off and formed the National Socialist Party, and our comrades went on to form the CPGB. The Call was the paper that did the job of forming the CPGB. That is what we're calling upon the AWL minority to do. They should side with the internationalists. They should rebel against the social chauvinists, as we did in 1914. That's the right path to take. Not to conciliate, not to excuse, not to make excuses for Sean McGann, but to open war on McDamna and his faction inside the AW. The minority who do stand for troops out now also ought to be criticising the fudges, the centrists, the marks, if you want to use that term, who don't dare call for troops out now because it's too much of a definite line against the social chauvinists or the social imperialists of McDamna and co. And I was talking to Mark on the way, and he said, "Have you read this leaflet?" Because we're saying, "Have we got a plan B for David Road?" And I was, well, you know, no, we hadn't, and no, I hadn't. We have now, but I hadn't read this. So we had a very, very brief discussion on this leaflet. Instead of actually discussing his moral responsibility, his political responsibility for an Israeli nuclear attack on Iran, he tries to turn it into his opposite. He tries to turn us into advocates of a Muller's bomb. Do you remember the debate in Hope? It was a very fierce one. Jerry was there saying, no, no, no. Do you remember that one? We can't support the Muller's bomb. This is absolutely outrageous, comrades from the Weekly Worker group. And we were fiercely arguing, apparently, that the Iranian people have the right to defend themselves by any means necessary. And that means a nuclear bomb. You remember that, Jerry? We were all saying it. No, we weren't, comrades. I don't know about the Iranian people should be able to defend themselves by any means necessary. Yeah, I say that, along with Malcolm X, right, in America. The Iranian people have the right to take up arms. Absolutely right.
They don't exist, John. It says so.
Well, the Iranian people exist for me, just as the Black Panthers, the Russian Bolsheviks. You understand. I know it's a joke, Phil, but anyway. Yes, that's what we are talking about. We are talking about the right of the Iranian people to resist the theocracy and the imperialists using any means at their disposal that they choose, right? Now, of course, in a military conflict, you can choose the wrong weapons, and we can get into a long discussion about what the right weapons and what the wrong weapons are. But do we mean, right, that the Iranian people should now arm themselves with bunker busters in order to send off their F-15s to Israel to blow up their 140 real nuclear weapons? Iran hasn't got one nuclear weapon, right? It might get one in 10 years' time, we don't know. The last report from the CIA seemed to indicate that they'd abandoned that project. So what is Sean meant to be attacking? I say Sean. What is Israel meant to be attacking, Sean? You know, nuclear facilities that seem to be being developed for peaceful purposes. That's what he's actually advocating. So maybe, yes, I'm sure that somewhere along the line, you know, the mullahs have got the idea of arming themselves with a nuclear weapon. Maybe they calculate, and I can understand why, looking at the fate of Saddam Hussein, who didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, and then looking at North Korea, who've got about 3, who maybe they could drop it on Seoul or something like that. Maybe they calculate, well, we don't want that to happen to us. I don't know. What we do know, for the best information we have available to ourselves, is Israel's got 140 or something like that. Iran has got none and no immediate prospect of any. But are we advocating that the Iranian people arm themselves with nuclear bombs? No. Because the Iranian people, as this leaflet points out, are not in power, right? The mullahs are. So the Hopi statement has got nothing to do with the mullahs. It's got nothing to do with the state formation. It's to do with the revolutionary movement. The revolutionary people of Iran have the right to defend themselves against the mullahs, against the imperialists, using whatever means they consider necessary. I think it's just a basic statement, surely, of socialist principle. Surely. Okay. So I would actually call, you know, Sean or McDamna said this is an example of the big lie. Well, I really don't think it is. I think that's the honest truth. It's not what he said, but it is what would result from what he said. I mean, that's just quite clear. So what about our support for the Muller's bomb? Well, Mark and myself, as I say, had a discussion on this. The statement begins something along the lines of H-bombs are not weapons of defence. They are weapons of mass murder, or the threat of mass murder. If they are used, it will not be in defence but murderous retaliation against cities and those who live in them. Against the civilian population, their effectiveness rests entirely on that threat. I agree. I actually agree. Right? That would be my position. Because we actually did have a discussion. Mark was saying, well, what happens if we took over the EU? Would we threaten the United States with a nuclear attack? If you attack us, we'll attack you, sort of idea. Well, who knows when we take over the EU? But my general approach would be, you say, should we disarm from nuclear weapons? Well, sort of, I was saying yes. Because what are we meant to do, right? US imperialism is threatening proletarian Europe, presuming the flame of revolution is alight. I don't know where it's begun. But we've taken the EU. Fuck me. Right? That's big. That's powerful. That is advanced. That's civilized. Right? What is going on in the United States? What's the proletariat of the United States going to be doing under those circumstances? Presumably this is in the midst of US decline, US crisis. Okay, some president threatens us. Threatens us what? If you do what? If you aid what? If you... What's our answer? Our basic answer is to the American proletariat, isn't it? That's our hope. That's what we believe in. We believe in the American Revolution. So yes, we would turn around, I think, and say, we are going to disarm, if they still exist, what are they called? Trident. I don't know what the Trident, whether it will be 1, 2, 3 or 10 by then. But yeah, we're going to go up to, whether it is in Scotland, where is it? Holy Loch, Faslane. We're going to go up and we're going to send all the comrades up with hammers and, they might make a mess, but we're going to send all the technicians up there to dismantle these barbaric weapons. Yes, we are. Right? We are not going to threaten, right, our class in America, in New York, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Chicago or Detroit with mass destruction. Quite the opposite. We're going to turn round to them and saying, comrades, if your state is threatening mass destruction on London, Berlin, Paris and Vienna, and Dublin, and Cork, right, we urge you, we call upon you to deal with your government. That's what we surely should be saying. What is the most powerful message we can send under those circumstances? Yeah, not to disarm, not to say to America, we're pacifists, come on in, we're the peace people, we're not going to fight. No, if they came in, we would fight for every city, every street. I'm not doing a Churchill, but we're fighting them on the beaches, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we would, using the method of people's war. Of course we would. Of course we would. Right? But would we threaten to blow up the solution? The American proletariat? I think would be crazy. It's like germ warfare. But what sort of a weapon is that? It's a capitalist weapon. It's like the neutron bomb. Remember that? It keeps property intact but kills people. I mean, we did say, didn't we, this is the perfect capitalist weapon. This is not our weapon. We're not pacifists. We are prepared to defend ourselves. We are prepared to kill. Well, no one makes any bones about that. But we're not prepared to commit mass destruction over what we consider is the answer. That would be crazy from our point of view. So this is either an honest mistake or it's an example of the big lie. And I accuse this of being an example of the big lie. I certainly know that in Hopi, this question as a debate, as an idea, something that we must discuss, was raised. That's true. Of course it was true. But I think we can say that the majority would have voted it down, right? And I think that remains. I think that's the situation. Certainly, right, Hopi has not adopted the idea in any sense of supporting implicitly or explicitly the idea of a Muller's bomb. It's just not true. Okay. So he goes on about it. Now, what else does he say? Israel apparently is a rational capitalist power. Iran is headed by, you know, mad mullahs, right? Apparently, in World War II, Churchill, was it Roosevelt still around at the time? 43, that Roosevelt and all the rest of them, they were rational politicians. Hitler was mad. Okay, I can actually, to a degree, if I sat him down on the psychiatrist's chair, Churchill, well, a little bit mad. You know, he drank a bottle of brandy apparently a day. You know, I didn't say it made him mad. I know he's going out there now to have a day smoke. I know where you're going. Right? Okay. All I'm trying to say is, okay, there can be truth there. That some politicians can be described as more or less clinically mad. You know. But I don't think that really tells us about the movement of world politics. And I don't think it really tells us much about Iran today. I mean, when I made my contribution, I made the point, well, if the mullahs are mad, there's Tony Blair, who's just converted to Catholicism. Now, I'm not a Catholic, but quite frankly, any rational investigation of Catholicism reveals a certain state of mind. Oh, God blimey, the virgin birth, do you really believe that? Well, it's the body, the bread turns to bone and what?
It's rubbish.
It's rubbish, right? Now, what about George Bloody Bush, born-again Christian, right? Who apparently, prays every morning. Oh, was it his wife said? No, it's 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. Prays on his knees to God every night to give him guidance. What about Ronald Reagan? Was it him or was it his missus that used? It was missus who then advised Ronald, in his dotage. Through, was it a soothsayer or cards?
Some woman, yeah.
Come on. Astrology. Well, okay, So what about the mullahs? All I was really trying to mean on that is they're all the same. Now, I'm not saying they're all mad, clinically mad. That would be ridiculous. But they all have strange ideas. What's it, the 13th Imam or the 12th Imam? Okay, it's no more ludicrous than the second coming of Jesus on that sense. In other words, what I'm arguing is actually, if you take Ahmadinejad, if you take that whole theocracy, they're no more crazy than the British ruling class or the American ruling class, let alone the bloody Israeli ruling class that claim now, right, certainly with the next Prime Minister, it would seem, that Israel was given to them by who? God. That this piece of land was given to them by Jehovah. Or Jehovah, This was given to them by God. And not only that, right, but God gave them not the present borders of Israel, but Solomon's Israel, which is complete bogus, apparently, according to my readings. But according to the myth, it not only includes present Israel, it goes right on to the Euphrates, right? It's not up to the Jordan that God gave them. It's right over there, right into, basically, it's Iraq, isn't it? It's right over there. It's through Jordan, right over there, right? All I'm trying to say is it's no more rational or irrational to believe in the 12th Imam, that God gave you Israel, that Jesus is just about to come, or that bread turns to bone and wine turns to blood. They're all wrong, they're all irrational, but as politicians, when I look at them, they seem equally rational as far as their class and sectional interests go. After all, if you look at the manoeuvring of the ruling class or the ruling clique or the ruling elite in Iran, how have they conducted themselves? Either you think things like the seizure of the American embassy and the regime they introduced into Iran was just crazy, which, on one level you can say it as an emotional reaction, or you can actually locate it in the political economy of that elite and the power structures there, and the city dwellers and the poor people coming in from the countryside. Is this just irrationality, or can it be explained? And do they act according to irrationality, or fundamentally are they guided by rationality? I think you have to come down to it. These guys are no different to any other ruling class on the face of this planet. So in other words, what we get is an apologia, right? That Iran is particularly mad. Iran is a mad dog. Iran has to be taken out. that America might do it in a particularly brutal fashion, Israel might do it in a particular brutal fashion. But shoot the dog, kill the savage beast, kill the rabid bastard. That's basically the message that's coming from Sean McGann. That's the truth. Read the leaflet. So just a few things. I think we've got to approach this by looking at reality square in the face. The reality is Iran's not just about to attack Israel. It's certainly not just about to attack Israel using nuclear weapons, right? There's no threat there. Israel is not tiny little Israel. Israel, as I said before, has 140 nuclear weapons. Israel, no problem. Israel is backed by the United States. Israel is in receipt of the latest American technology, in receipt of the latest American weapons. If Israel wanted, it could quite easily do another 1967, and that is take out the air forces, do the armed forces of Syria, Jordan, Egypt. It could do it. I don't think it would take them 7 days now. I think it could almost do it nowadays in 7 hours. But we won't argue about it. All I'm saying is that the military might is now far more in favour of Israel now than it was in 1967. In 1967, Israel just took out the air forces of Jordan, Egypt and Syria, and then took territory which none of these countries have been able to get back militarily, right? Have all been, to any territory that's been got back has been the result of diplomacy, not the result of the military strength of the Arab countries. If we look at Israel, what is it doing on the West Bank? It's trying to expand. We've got how many thousand settlements on the West Bank? Are they giving any of them up? Are they withdrawing? No. They are maintaining those settlements. They're building those settlements. In other words, all governments in Israel have a plan for a greater Israel. In other words, Israel is not a victim, right? It's the junior partner of US imperialism, and it's an expansionist and aggressive power. It is acting, possibly, in this case, on its own interest, but I readily accept that it needs the go-ahead from America. But what about this? We all know that America is in economic trouble. We all know that it needs an enemy without. Okay, Israel does Iran's nuclear facilities. What does Ahmadinejad do then? Presumably, maybe they don't even need any encouragement from Ahmadinejad. Presumably Hezbollah hit off against Israel. Presumably Hamas kicks off against Israel. Presumably in Iran there are mass demonstrations. Presumably in order to whip up the population, Ahmadinejad might send a missile or two off. Certainly when it comes to television, when it comes to the radio, when it comes to the press of Iran, what are they going to be saying? We will bring vengeance to you. We will bring the wrath of Allah down upon you. Right? What does the American press, what does the American media, what do the American leaders then say? Poor little Israel, the second Holocaust. We must go to the rescue of poor little Israel, who's the victim, right? Who is only doing it out of self-defense. What does the United States do? Well, according to one website that I've read, again, these are things, that are in the public domain. The United States has military plans, basically to blitzkrieg Iran. 11,000 sites. That's what they've targeted, 11,000 sites. The idea would be to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age. That, maybe, is what the Americans are looking to do. No one looking at George Bush can tell me that's hyperbole. That seems to be what some neocons are advocating, that seems to be what some generals are advocating. And what about that friendly, peaceful guy, Obama? What did he say about the Iraqi war? It was a mistake. We shouldn't have done it. We should have done Iran. That's what he says. What did Mrs. Clinton that pacifist, that peacenik saying, right? If Israel is under threat, we will destroy Iran. So we don't need to just look at the Republican Party. Right over into the Democrats, we see the same agenda. Not because they are mad, but because of the needs of US imperialism, a declining, crisis-ridden US imperialism. Okay. 5 minutes, then I'll finish.
Yeah.
A couple of other points. Has Israel got the right to defend itself? It's an absurd question. It's an absurd question. It's got 140 nuclear bombs. I mean, are we conferring, what are we meant to be doing? Conferring a moral right? It's like looking at the United States. Has it got the right to defend itself? It's the dominant power on the face of the planet. Has Nazi Germany, right, in 1943 got the right to defend itself? This is just absurd. This is not Marxist language. What a Marxist would be talking about under those circumstances, surely, is the oppressors. Is you, as part of the oppressor country, what's your response to the violence of the oppressed? That's surely our starting point. In other words, in the middle of World War I, Connolly and Sinn Féin, or whatever they were called, Irish Republican Brotherhood, take over the centre of Dublin. What's our response in the oppressor country? To clap when Connolly was executed, like the Labour Party did, or to join with Connolly, so we defend Connolly, right? We'll revenge Connolly. We're to get rid of you barbarians, you oppressors. We take the side of the oppressed. That's what we would do. That's what we would. Now, do we take the side of the mullahs? This has been explained time and time again by Yasmin and other comrades. These are people that are quite prepared to do a deal with imperialism. Right? These are not anti-imperialists. It's the ordinary people of Iran who are the anti-imperialists. These are the real enemies of imperialism. Now, I just ask this closing question. The problem we've got in the Middle East at the moment is there's no parties worth their name of the working class. But where would we look for a solution? We could look, as Sean does, to democratic Israel, to the working class movement, which is very well organised. It used to be quite well organised, didn't it? The Fed, I can't remember the name of it in Hebrew. Histadrut. Anyway, the Fed, the Federation, the General Federation of, is it Jewish Labour in Palestine? Whatever its full name is, the Fed, right? It used to be an incredibly powerful organisation, right? It used to organise workers, it used to pretend to be socialist and all the rest of it. But in reality, what we saw created in the 1940s, and I'm talking about before the State of Israel, certainly after the formation of the State of Israel, was a labour aristocracy, right? No different in essence, to the Protestant working class in the north of Ireland. No different in essence to the South African white working class. These people have done a historic compromise with their bourgeoisie. There are higher Jewish wages, right? There are bars on the employment of Palestinian workers. This is the sort of class action that this class carries out. In other words, it's organised to do a deal with the bourgeoisie against the majority of the working class, which aren't Jewish. I'm talking about not just in that state, but on a world level. On the other hand, look at Iran. Look at the history of Iran. The constitutional revolution, which wasn't just some nice little, let's have a debate in Parliament. It was a revolution, right, that was triggered off, inspired by the Russian Revolution of 1905, that lasts from 1906, am I right, Yasmin, to 1911, or something like that. This is a real movement of the people. This is a genuine upsurge. Look at Iran after World War II. This is not history, I know, so Yasmin again come in. Some sort of left Soviet republic after World War I, the Gilan Republic, same after World War II. Look at Tudeh, pretty opportunist party, but it was a mass party in the 50s, a mass workers' party. Mossadegh nationalises the oil, right? Huge movement of the people. Look at the revolution of 1979. I think the right date would be to 81. Yeah? The biggest mass movement that I think we've seen in global history. Millions of people on the streets. Massive self-activity. Triggered off, I think, by your comrades, wasn't it? Taking the guns from the soldiers. Well, you know, I think that was my take on it. But yeah, a huge movement. Comrades coming out of prison and suddenly finding organisations that were 20, 30, becoming 30,000, becoming 100,000. Workers setting up shores. A military strike, a blitzkrieg, is against what? Iran's theocracy. Where are they going to be when this is going on? They're going to be in their bunkers or they'll be abroad. Who is going to be hit by this blitzkrieg? The working class, the poor, the progressives, the people of Iran. The potential revolutionary situation in Iran is thrown back. Anything we take over under those circumstances is going to be ashes. Is that what we wish? Is that what we stand idly by and say we're neutral about? That's the truth of it. Now, we do not stand for driving the Israeli Jews into the sea. That's stupid. We didn't stand for, how should I put it, driving out the South African whites. We do not stand for the extermination of the Protestant working class in the north. Anyone who does, I don't think, is a Marxist. I think that's an absurdity. That's a piece of barbarism. We've got to come up with solutions for these people. But I do not believe there's a solution within Israel. I don't think there's a Palestinian Jewish solution. I think there has to be a regional solution. I think that we have got to organise the solution on an all. I agree with Moshe. And now whether that includes Iran, I don't know. But quite clearly, Iran has got more potential in the short to medium term to have a revolution than Israel. All right? That's quite clear. And anybody who wishes to launch a war under these circumstances against Iran is crazy or criminal. And what I accuse Sean McDermott of being is not crazy. Right? I think he's criminal. And I think he's crossed class lines. And I think anyone who doesn't rebel against that regime becomes implicit in that crossing of class lines. So what I say to David Broder and anybody else that I will call a comrade is that comrades rebel. Rebel against social imperialism. The ultra-imperialism thing. Yes, ultra-imperialism is smooth, it's a cartel. I use the term US super-imperialism, for example, if you look at where I write about it, which quite clearly indicates there's a pecking order, and the United States at the top, Britain is in alliance with the United States, the EU, others follow, but quite clearly this isn't smooth. The United States isn't playing the role of cop in the sense of sorting out little regional disputes. The United States is the main exploiter on the planet and is sucking surplus value from others into itself. So that's my version. I don't think it's ultra-imperialism, in other words. But I'm merely noting that in, was it 2002, that is how the AWL justified, for example, its position on Iraq, how the United States would bring civilization. And you judge it by the results, I suppose. Has it brought civilization? Has it brought normal class politics? Has it brought trade unionism to Iraq? I don't see any evidence of it. And if there is any evidence, it's in spite of the United States, not because of the United States. On Hopi. Well, comrades in Hopi, I think, need to defend Hopi. CPGB will defend that. I don't know whether it's a good idea for Hopi to debate the AWR. I think it's a very good idea for the CPGB to debate the AWR. I think it's a very good idea for the RDG to debate the AWR. I think it's a very good idea for Permanent Revolution to debate with the AWR. But I think Hopi, because it is a broad organisation, because as Steve says, it isn't armed with, well, we think it's super-imperialism, or we think it's X, Y, or Z. No, we need to have a proper debate if we decide to have a debate. And I don't think actually, I mean, when our comrades on the leadership of Hopi did propose it, the majority of the PCC thought that was a mistake. We did not want Hopi debating with the AWL. We preferred the CPGB. We actually opposed the idea of some fringe meeting at the NUS conference between Hopi and the AWL. And I think that's the correct position to take. On what Jim says, I think we need to distinguish between what I would call the left and the workers. And it's quite clear that the AWL is in the workers' movement. And in that sense, so are lots of right-wing trade union leaders. You know, we're not proposing to drive them out. They're not any different in that sense to some ordinary ragtag social imperialist in the Labour Party. What I'm saying is that I do not regard them any longer as part of the left. And that's what I'm saying. And I think that we should have a different attitude to them than we do, for example, even to John Rees, who quite clearly is still part of the left, an opportunist, but still part of the left. What we're talking about in terms of crossing lines is a difference between opportunism, right, and someone who is a social imperialist. And I think that's an important division that we should make. From my memory, Hopi, supported by the CPGB certainly, called for a nuclear-free Middle East. Right? That's what it called for. Not a partially free Middle East. Not when we get hold of Israeli nuclear weapons, maybe we'll think about it sort of idea. But okay, that's our general principle. Who the hell knows what we'll do under X and Y circumstances? But I think that is a correct principle. Why? Because in essence, while we can talk about, yes, you can target nuclear bombs on nuclear bombs, while you can, yes, use them in the battlefield, what is the attitude of the workers' movement? We don't just arm ourselves with the same weapons as the bourgeoisie. It's quite feasible to imagine, and I know there might have been some mad South African scientists, for example, to develop some sort of chemical weapon that targeted blacks. You know, specifically blacks. I mean, what would our attitude be when we have a revolution in South Africa and we've got these weapons that can kill just blacks? Do we say, well, just in case? I mean, no. There are different forms of warfare that we fight compared with what they fight. So, of course, weapons are weapons, but there are weapons and weapons. And I think that's true. So, in my view, I think Hopi is correct to take the view that we stand for, we campaign for a nuclear-free Middle East. And that means we're against Israel's nuclear weapons, and we're against any possibility of Iran equipping itself with nuclear weapons, even if they were tactical weapons or battlefield weapons, whatever. We are against that. Now, in terms of the question of weapons, I just wanted to, just on that specific question, just to remind comrades of Engels' pamphlet. I think it was written in the 1890s, I could be wrong, but Can Europe Disarm? Right, that doesn't mean he was a pacifist. He was in favour of mass conscription, universal conscription. Right? But he was not in favour of the sort of weapons the bourgeoisie were starting to equip themselves with, which they ended up fighting World War I with. Right? He wanted mass armies, not drilled armies, but mass popular militias. Right? Not dreadnoughts, not gas, not chemical weapons, right? But weapons that could be used simply for defence, right? That's the point. And I think we need to learn a lesson there. So in other words, if you take the sort of weapons we're talking about, they are about mass resistance. That's the crucial question for us. They're not meant to be designed, how can we conquer the United States? How we conquer the United States is how do we actually raise the working class, how do we encourage the working class in the United States to liberate themselves? Surely that's our perspective, surely that's our platform. Just a few other couple of points. Conrad asked, why is the AWL doing this? I mean, all sorts of factional reasons, all sorts of narrow reasons, but I'd also actually suggest that if you look at the AWL project, it is premised on trade unionism. It is premised, I think, on some deal or some notion of the labour bureaucracy. That's how I would, you know, in the bigger picture, explain that. And I think it's basically reflecting the politics of a section of the labour bureaucracy. Right, just a couple of other, I think only one other point actually.
Okay.
And that is, I just wanted to put the record straight on another leaflet for Jerry's benefit in terms of CPGB AWL merger. Does any comrade here remember our merger talks? I mean, you're all nodding your heads because I don't remember our merger talks. I don't remember our merger talks. What we proposed with the AWL under specific conditions, and we would have proposed it with Workers' Power or anybody else who is up for it, and that is a joint paper in the Socialist Alliance. And I insisted, because we were smaller, that that paper would have to have a 50-50 editorial board division. And that was a challenge to the AWL to show how committed they were to the Socialist Alliance project, right? They bottled that. They refused to go along with that. I think that proved the point. In other words, our offer, which was a generous offer, a highly risky offer, was done in the context of the Socialist Alliance. It was not an attempt to merge the two organisations. If the two organisations were going to merge, it was going to be in the context of the Socialist Alliance that had become a Socialist Alliance party that had started to adopt what? Our sort of programme. We weren't out, in terms of the AWL, to have a non-aggression deal. We weren't out to water down our politics. Jerry might disagree with our politics. If you take the Falklands War, we didn't adopt it in order to court the AWL. We adopted the politics we adopted because they're the politics we believed in. You don't want to give them any points, that's entirely up to you. But they weren't adopted for diplomatic reasons. So I just thought I'd put the record straight on that one, and I think I've spoken
Yeah,
just in time.
we've finished. Dinner is ready, but...